Hello. Welcome to Kindly Neurodivergent with Kay. This show is to spend quality time with each other, kindly discussing the similarities and wide range of differences we experience. The experiences we discuss on this show are for educational purposes only. Please do not substitute them for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Before we begin, I respectfully request that if you witness any pauses during this show, please continue watching. I'm composing a spontaneous comment or question, someone processing their thoughts, in addition to repeating something that was unintelligible or misunderstood. It is natural discourse, and we can choose not to say anything while this is occurring. Today I have Helene Lieberman with me. She will be discussing the importance of handwriting in the digital age. Welcome, Helene.
Thank you very much. It's really good to be here.
Yeah.
Please introduce yourself.
Okay, so my name is Helene Lieberman, as you heard, and I'm an occupational therapist in pediatrics. I've been an occupational therapist for about 36 years, which is a long time, and I've seen a lot of changes. I also have a master's degree in family support services. I've worked in many, many settings, including hospitals, outpatient centers, in early intervention in the homes, in preschools, schools, both private and public. And I also work currently as well in an ICF, an intermediate care facility for adults. And interestingly enough, some of those adults in the intermediate care facility were some of my preschool students many years ago. So it's came full circle.
Must be nice.
It's nice, and it's very interesting to also see the change, but it's also there's sometimes not a change. And what I've noticed is that some of those preschoolers who had the most challenges are the ones who are in the group home. So it's just there's some nice changes, and then there's some of them who just stayed like that. And it's just an interesting thing for me to think about in terms of what we see when children are younger and how it could maybe not progress as much, which is sad.
Definitely understandable. In today's digital world, many people question the relevance of handwriting. Why do you believe handwriting still matters?
Oh my goodness. Well, first of all, there's research that shows when people write, other parts of their brain light up. So on MRIs, they're seeing the visual pieces light up, they're seeing creativity light up. So we know that there's definitely a connection versus handwriting versus a typing sort of thing. The other thing is that when you're writing, it's a slower process for sure, but sometimes the slower process helps people be more creative and think a little bit. It also has fewer digital distractions because you don't have things like spell check or maybe an email or something else popping up. There also have been studies for increased memory when people are writing by hand. They will remember more on a test. And that is something very interesting, even with college students. So it doesn't just have to be a younger student. And so, of course, fine motor development will improve. You have to have the fine motor development to write, but working on it also. And it's not just the fine motor for the writing. It could also even be for using maybe a fork and a knife and other types of things that you use with your hands. And I think also if somebody writes nicely, I think there's this natural thing in class, and I've seen it with in elementary schools when teachers put essays on the wall and somebody is looking and like, oh, that person has very nice handwriting. So I think it does give somebody some self-esteem in some way. And definitely it's something functional, even though we are in a digital age, of course, and you can get by with just using typing or voice. I still write notes sometimes. I know most people do, not many checks lately, but sometimes there are forms to complete. So it's still used. And I definitely think there's an advantage of learning it. Maybe you're not going to do it all the time, but learning it is important.
What sparked your interest in this specifically?
In handwriting?
Mm.
So I mentioned I worked in a preschool, several of them, and one of the preschools I worked in had only children on the autism spectrum. So everything from, like I mentioned, very significantly challenged to children you would not ever know. They were in a classroom integrated with other children and everybody's doing the same thing. But I did have some children who struggled with writing, and it was not a favorite activity. It was a challenge to get them to write. And even though they might have had a goal for that on their IEP or the parents wanted them to continue writing, it was still something we needed to work on. And it was early in the school year and Halloween was coming up. And I was doing a project where the paper was black and we were using white paper on top and white chalk to do a skeleton picture. And I noticed that the children who did not want to do the writing were very intrigued by this format where the background was black and the white was what was the impression what was coming up. And it kind of made sense because it is a very high contrast. So what I started doing is taking strips of white paper. So if the child's name started with an A, I would take 3 strips of paper, form it into an A, and paste it onto black construction paper. And lo and behold, they would start writing within the white space because they could see what they were doing. And then it just started to make sense to me. And I did a little bit of research, and we know that people have some visual impairments. White on the black background does help. So it helps for everyone. And what I noticed is the children were not as distracted. So on a white paper with black letters, they might color on the white side because it's there and you could see their colors. But on the black paper, they did not seem to color on it because you really couldn't get that feedback from the color you were using. So it just grew from there. And so my interest was, wow, if these children do need to write and the parents still want them to write, this is a great technique. And it also worked for the children who weren't struggling. So that was nice too, kind of this universal thing that can be used for everyone.
Why do you think it is so?
I think it is the less distraction factor. That is my thought. I've done some research, as we'll probably talk later, but in my heart of hearts, I know that the contrast is very good. And I know that there's nothing to discuss. So when you have a white letter on a black piece of paper, you're not looking at pictures. So often in books where children are learning to write, you might have A and then an apple, picture of an apple and an alligator and other things that do start with the letter A. Of course, those are all important skills, but some would get very distracted. The other thing is the lack of the visual feedback. So when they are coloring on black, they're not getting that feedback. And they're not seeing, if you chose purple as your favorite color, they want to see purple. You're only going to see it in the white space.
Should books be redesigned?
So I don't think all books need to be redesigned. However, the visually impaired, there is a machine, and I'm sorry, I do not know the name of it, but it's a machine that if you put a book or a paper under it this way, you can change the color. So let's say somebody works better with a yellow and a red maybe. You can change it, but of course, that's a large machine and you would need to stay in one place to read a book. But on my phone, I change the background as well. You can flip the background. And I don't think for everyone, but yeah, why not? I think it would be a good idea to have options for people to have the black paper and the white print.
What cognitive, sensory, and motor skills are involved when a child learns to write by hand?
Oh my gosh, there's so many. Okay, so that is why handwriting is so complex because there are so many things that are needed. So, of course, you need cognitive skills, like you mentioned. You have to understand what the letter is and put some context to it so you understand why you are writing. You have to be able to attend. As I mentioned before, if you are not attending to what's on the paper, you are not going to be able to read or write. And also just focusing, because when writing takes longer, you have to have a longer attention span to focus on what it is, especially at the beginning when you're spelling. And that is not easy. Another thing is you have to have visual memory. You have to remember what the letters look like. You remember how they're formed. You have to have memory in general. You have to be able to sequence and plan something because the letters should be formed in a certain way. That's just for ease of flow. So you have to be able to sequence it. You have to be able to organize your thoughts. If you're not just copying something and you're actually creating a sentence or a story, you have to be able to organize your thoughts. You have to have visual skills if you are writing to see what you're doing. Of course, low vision, you can write. Also, people who are visually impaired often write maybe their name, maybe not everything, but many of them use a Braille system. You have to be able to discriminate visually. And many children, especially up to second grade, have trouble with the lowercase p's and b's and d's and q's. You have to be able to actually keep your body upright. Because if you don't have a core control and balance and you are moving all around, it is challenging to keep your hand still in order to write, because it's more important to keep your body upright because nobody wants to be falling. You have to be able to have some tactile feedback to feel the tool in your hand, but also to how much pressure so that you don't write too light and nobody can see what you've written, or you write too heavy and you're constantly breaking your writing tool. And of course, you have the motor skills, that the ability to hold the writing tool, to be able to position your shoulder, your elbow, to be able to be dexterous a little bit, not a ton, but some dexterity. And you have to have some hand strength as well, because if you are writing for a while, you will need hand strength, because fatigue is a very common thing I see. And I also fatigue when I write more than, let's say, 2 notes, because I still do treatment. So if I'm writing more than 2 notes, my hand actually gets fatigued. And as an OT, I should have some better, I use too much pressure when I write, so I should work on that myself.
How do you determine if this is appropriate goal?
A writing goal? I think a lot of it is parent generated at the beginning. Most schools do. They don't necessarily have a writing curriculum, but they do start having goals with children to just developmentally copy maybe a vertical line, a horizontal line, and a circle, and some of the basic shapes before they start writing. And they will progress from there. So then it's typically writing the first letter of your name and then writing names. So the teachers and parents are usually developing these goals together at the beginning. And then there's school demands. So if the curriculum demands that the children have to write a sentence or a paragraph, and the child is unable to do that in their curriculum, and they need the related service, obviously the teacher will teach the basics, but if they need something additional, if they're not getting the skill, that's how it will become a goal. When I don't usually determine goals by myself, I will talk to teachers, I will talk to parents. And when the child gets older, I will talk to the child when they're able to make those decisions. Because sometimes, and again, we're all human, if you don't want to do something, you are not going to do it sometimes. So there has to be a lot of buy-in for a goal to get, to actually master a goal.
I only type due to fine motor.
And it's obviously it's very efficient for you. So again, if someone said we're going to make a writing goal when you were, let's say in high school, you'd probably say, no, that's crazy. It doesn't work for me. I'm efficient with this system. I don't need to. And not everyone, like I said, needs to write. People who can write often don't write, but you really have to have a communication system. I think that's the important thing. Some way to get your message across, to fill out a form, whether it's the typing or writing, a grocery list, whatever you need to do. Again, goals should be individual for the person because they're the ones who have to work on those goals.
My signature is a fancy K.
Very nice. Okay. So listen, look at some medical professionals. They always say if you have bad handwriting, you're going to be a doctor, which is kind of scary because you want to be able to read, especially if they're writing a prescription. But again, obviously now as everything is digitalized and everything goes through the computer. But having a signature, I think it's like your personal statement, and I think that's kind of nice.
Yeah.
Can you walk us through what BlackBock writing looks like in practice with a child?
Sure. So of course, it's always going to be different because everyone is different. Let me give you one example. I have a young lady I've been working with, and she is able to recognize the letters, able to actually sound them out. She's in second grade now, and she's able to sound out some words and read certain familiar words. But handwriting is not a favorite activity. So the teacher also and the mother wanted the child to write her first name, at least. They have something in their classroom where they sign in when they come in, and maybe to put her name at the top of a paper that the teacher hands out. So what we started to do, since she was familiar with the letters, is I just took the BlackBock letters of her name. And that was all we used initially. And initially she traced within the white space of the cards. And the letters were large, and there are 4 sizes of each letter. So we eventually got a size smaller, and when she got a little smaller, we transitioned that to using a whiteboard. So the marker on the whiteboard with doing the same letters and copying it over. And it was a lot of rote practice. And so maybe it was doing 1 letter first, and then 2 letters together, and then stringing the 3 letters together. So eventually, she got all the letters to write, not needing to model it, because there's a motor plan. When you write or do something over and over, you kind of remember it. So now the child is writing her first name with the uppercase as the first letter and the rest in lowercase, which is what her mom wanted.
How can tools like interactive metronome or support handwriting or overall fine motor development?
Okay, so can I explain a little bit what the metronome is so that we understand it? Okay, so a metronome, many people know that from maybe if you've taken a music lesson of some sort, basically kind of it's a timer and you can hear it, sometimes you can see it. The interactive metronome is something that's a company designed, and basically it's a metronome beat. And you're hearing the beat over headphones, and you're watching something on the computer screen. So it could be maybe a basketball going into a basketball hoop. And you're also doing a movement at the same time. So it's a lot of, multisensory. So when you are doing the movement, you are trying to do, let's say, a clap at the same time as you're hearing the beat in your ears. And when that happens, something on the screen will happen. So if, let's say you're right on the beat, you clap right on the beat, the basketball will go into the hoop. If you're a little off, a little late, or a little quick, the basketball might hit the backboard and then go away. And if you're super early, super late, the ball will never get near the hoop. So it gives feedback. So you could see you need to be a little quicker or a little slower. And there are a lot of games, and it's very engaging, and you could change different things also. So you can change the games. Let's say somebody prefers soccer, and they're always coming up with new games. So that's the interactive metronome. So as I mentioned before, there's a lot of timing in the interactive metronome. So timing and rhythm is important for writing because you want to have that smooth flow and that motor plan to do something over and over again, which writing only 26 letters in the English alphabet, and uppercase and lowercase, so you're talking about 52 letters. It also has you work on attention. There are parameters you can adjust in the interactive metronome. So I can have somebody doing the activity for 1 minute or 10 minutes, which does get a little boring if they're doing the same thing for 10 minutes, but it does work on that attention span because sometimes writing is boring, I'm not gonna lie. And sometimes things we do in life are boring as well. And we have to do some of those things. It works on using both hands because you're doing either a clapping or a hand movement, and you could make your own activities as well. And for handwriting, you do have to hold the paper and then use your other hand to write. And it can help with processing speed as well. So that's a connection of being creative or thinking of something to write. And definitely some endurance. So that's the metronome. And then for listening, I'll explain a little bit what that is. Basically, it's filtered music that people listen to also on headphones. And you could feel it in your bones, like bone conduction. And it really helps with regulation in terms of self-regulation. And that's important because to sit for a while, you need some self-regulation in order to kind of organize your body to do something. Auditory processing, which is another thing that the integrated listening systems can work on, is important, especially for that literacy and understanding the spelling. And if somebody tells you, let's say on a spelling test, to write bad, you want to hear that word. So you need to process what you hear. It can also help with some of that postural control and balance, which is important for writing, and definitely like for the body awareness. So there are things that are not physically maybe needed, or when you're doing the integrated listening, you don't need that physical skill of writing, but it definitely helps organize the body so you can do the writing.
How do you determine how much to work on at once?
That's a very good question. Definitely by attention span is the way I gauge it. So because BlackBock has cards, it's not in a bound book. I could just take out what I need. And I usually gauge how much I give to somebody based on their body feedback, whether they're jumping out of their skin, or maybe somebody is having a bad day and it's not a good day for doing something so concentrated. I usually do I have like a formula in my head though. I usually try to do at least 2 letters each time if they're a new writer and they understand they're at that point where they could learn letters, or 1 or 2 words if they're at that stage. We can also just work on shapes, and I'll do 1 or 2 drawings that will combine the different shapes. Usually we're not just working on sitting down and writing, there are other things we're working on as well beforehand. So that writing piece will usually come at the end, because we've worked on some of those foundational skills beforehand. Sometimes I'll do a little writing task at the beginning and then do the regular session with foundational skills. Then I'll bring back the writing task at the end just to see if there's a change, and to see if those things we did do during an OT session actually had an impact.
So you never just focus on writing.
That might be one of the goals, but no, I can't just sit down and have somebody write. Again, when I mentioned all the other foundational skills that are necessary for writing, those have to be built in first because handwriting combines all those things. So if you just sit down and have them write, again, boring, but also you are skipping over all those foundations that need to happen first.
Of course, I just didn't know what kind of support they needed.
Yeah, and everybody, we're all different. So whatever is not in their foundation yet that they need to work on, that is what we work on. That is something, the end goal might be the same as somebody else, but the way to get there might be a little different from one person to another.
How do you help children who find writing physically exhausting or frustrating?
So for the physically exhausting piece, we would probably work on more their endurance and their strength, and those things first. And obviously do less writing because when you talk about frustration, you give somebody a task that they're not ready for, it'll be very, very frustrating. So that physical piece will definitely come in, whether it's hand strength, whether it's core strength. And I really do like to have families do activities also. And it doesn't have to be anything outlandish. It could be something, okay, well, if your child is having a banana, have them peel the banana or peel their tangerine or whatever it is that they're doing. And letting the parents understand the foundation. And a lot of times parents are smart, they're gonna, oh, well, we just went to the grocery store. Maybe the child can carry the groceries in, not the eggs, of course. Maybe the child can help carry a dish to the table or something like that. So they say, okay, that's strength as well. I'm sorry, and I forgot the other part, the frustration. I'm sorry, so the frustration part. The frustration, I really think, is a matter of giving them the just right challenge, something that that they could do that's maybe a little harder, but not so hard that they are going to break down. I have a child I work with right now who, if you give him something that he perceives as challenging, he's extremely bright. He's like, oh, let's do, and make up some other thing that he sees, or start a whole conversation on something that is totally irrelevant because perception is this will be frustrating. So it's really understanding that child and maybe giving them something motivating. If they enjoy Pokemon, give them the name of a Pokemon character to write or the first letter of it, and making it more of their interest versus the therapist's interest or a parent's interest.
You've done research on sensory integration and preschool handwriting.
Yes.
What stood out to you in those findings?
Okay, so in the one with sensory, it was in a school, and we compared children who got individual sensory integration therapy versus a classroom that was very sensory enriched, whether it was doing sensory activities or extra playground or movement or other types of things. And we were measuring play, and actually both improved in play, and it wasn't that significantly different. So that's kind of nice to know for schools, because not every school has sensory equipment, and not every school maybe has an individual therapist who's able to do that or has the knowledge of that. So sometimes just with a little consultation and engineering the classroom and the classroom schedule, that would be a way to integrate some of those senses. It's not sensory integration necessarily, but it's a way to work on all those things. And with the handwriting one, it was in a pre-K classroom. And what I did was look at two different classrooms that had a handwriting curriculum for pre-K. And The only difference was the classroom that I worked in had the BlackBock writing program once a week. And what that showed is that the children with the BlackBock program were able to trace better, stay within lines better, and had better coordination. The other thing that I didn't notice because I was only there maybe an hour each week, but the teachers told me that those children in that class, because the teachers, it was a school where the teachers switch. So the teachers, both teachers noticed that in the classroom that had the BlackBock writing, those children wanted to color more or would stay at a table coloring longer. So that was kind of nice to know. So it seems like maybe it became easier for them. And so maybe that's why they stayed it longer, or maybe we just sparked an interest. I don't know the actual reason, but that is what we saw.
Why would it not be sensory integration?
Because sensory integration uses certain principles that were defined. So Aging Ayers came up with that theory, and there are people who she mentored and continue it on. So there's certain things that you have to look for. A lot of it's child directed. You are also individually looking at activities for that child's sensory system after an evaluation. So the sensory integration is delivered in a certain manner. It's always going to look different for every kid, of course, because everyone's different. So when you're in the classroom, you're doing pretty much the same thing with all the kids because there's some sort of curriculum. Now, again, you can have sandbox for everybody, and somebody might be building and somebody might be, burying their head in the sand, whatever it is that they're doing. So, but the activity will be the same. The teacher is not telling the child, okay, Johnny, you do this, and Susie, you do that. And the child can't exactly always determine what they want to do in the class because it's a class.
Thank you, Helene, for doing this with me. It was
Very
great
well.
to have you on. Please share this talk show. Everyone watching, don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, and share on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube.